Hey guys and girls, Board now back with you for this week's Succession review. So Succession Season 4, Episode 4, and it is called Honeymoon State. So Honeymoon States, the title comes from what Willow describes Connor's idea of visiting these different states on their honeymoon. Connor very much thinking about business when it comes to the election, so desperate to get his approval ratings up by visiting what he considers his key states on his honeymoon with poor loyal Willow. The other really fun scene with Connor in this episode is his really rushed agreement on a deal for taking over the Roy family house from Marsha, who makes a return in this episode and has a big role to play. But that was really funny how they quickly did a negotiation and it was really rushed through, and the fallout from that, some of the reactions, fuck, she gave him the house, and Roman's line about them all being yeah, let's go and live with Connor, we're all Charlie in the chocolate factory, let's pile into the bed. This was a really strong episode and really satisfying follow on from the big dramatic events of last week. And just the mood of it at the beginning, how much more somber it was, but then how it gradually built, and you slowly seen how characters are getting back into things and how they're manoeuvring about all the little schemes and manoeuvres to try and get power, to try and get their foot in the door, and just some great drama with the various characters at different points. Each character, I think, at one point or the other has a big part in the episode, so that's really well handled. So Kendall, for the time being, at the end of this episode, is the main man. He's the one who the board agrees to hand over power to as CEO. They say it's a temporary type measure because it appears as though his father Logan had that written down on a bit of paper, but then there's some question over. He seems to be highlighting it with a pencil. It was written in with a pencil, which seems to bring into question how official it all is, particularly with other members of the board and with Shiv as well, who's trying to stake her claim. So there's a lot of fine details to do with that, and great sort of commentary and stuff to do with that, with how the indecision of people and not really knowing what Logan ultimately wanted and how they should handle the fallout from his death, but at the same time how they should move on. Once you get into the meat of the episode, it is almost business as usual, except they've got now a whole host of new dilemmas and just controversies which this whole thing causes. But the arc of of Kendall in the episode, and the way he's very much the central figure, is really satisfying to watch, because I love the mood at the start of the episode with each character. Early in the morning, you see them all get up and they're all going through their whole thing. Kendall notably is very subdued for a lot of the episode. He in many ways seems to be taking it the hardest, and he seems the most withdrawn and reserved, but that's so perfect when you think about what happens at the end of the episode. It starts to make you think, is this Kendall being genuine and human, or is this just him being calculated? Is he maybe the most ruthless character on the show when it comes down to it? Certainly now then his father is out of the picture, it's almost in many ways he can become the next generation of Logan now that his father isn't around anymore. So I think that's an interesting side to this when you compare him to Roman, because Roman, for all his brashness, for all his crude remarks and sarcasm, certainly in this season I think we've seen more of a human side to Roman. We have seen how, despite the front he puts up, how he in many ways is yeah, he does have a sense of right and wrong, and he's not afraid to put that out there. And he, like in the previous episode, he was clearly like disheartened about the idea that the father Logan wasn't going to come to the not the funeral, to the wedding, to Connor's wedding. Like he was almost openly questioning that, and he was very awkward in the scene with Jerry where he was the one assigned to let him know. And there's certain scenes like that in this episode. So there's a scene with Carrie where she is like just has a breakdown because she's not allowed back into the house to get her things, and that order has come down from Marsha, who's, as I said, shows back up and is starting to like use her power and throw her weight around, and like the security guys say, let's take her out the back way so that no one really sees her. And Roman, he's sort of being his quippy self, but he's also like helping her as well. That's Carrie, and he's also like when Carrie leaves, he says, "Geez, that was a bit rough, wasn't it, Marsha?" And that was like one of the more uncomfortable scenes, like truly, like to a character who didn't really deserve it, because like, even if Carrie was a character who was maybe just into Logan for his money or what he could do for her, which it's not really possible to say one way or the other. I think on some level she did love him, or sort of thought she did. So, but she certainly didn't deserve like a public humiliation like that. That scene was really hard to watch, I think. But we all get we get this different setup with the different siblings. Shiv's storyline's interesting in this episode because she, like at the start of the episode, she gets a call about her blood test, and she's been looking into if she can have children, so she's starting to think about that, and she gets a good result back over the phone, but because of what's happened, she just can't think about that sort of thing, and it's almost like just losing her father has like brought this home to roost. Like, does she really want kids, or like he's not going to be around to see it and to play with the children? Not that he, like, in many ways wants to, as someone else points out. I think it's Tom later in the episode points out, but definitely the timing of this, and Shiv and her role as like a woman in like modern business and stuff once again is like in the focus in this episode, because she is kind of taken for granted again by the siblings, by Kendall and Roman, and the board in general. Like that they're bringing up all these criticisms about the idea of a woman being CEO, which even in 2023 is like just sometimes just seen as like a no-no, and just seen as, yeah, no, this is a big deal. This doesn't really look good. They're not fit for this sort of role. And because it happens with Jerry in the episode as well. Like, even though she's making a case that she was a favourite and she has experience in the role, so it should definitely be heard there. They're just dismissing it and saying then, well, Logan wanted you out anyway, like he was going to fire you, and like you're sort of in the past in a way. You don't really have what it takes anymore. But Jerry's staking her claim as well. Jerry against Frank was really fun in this episode. I enjoyed that battle. But yeah, Kendall coming in early in the episode into the house and just through this sea of the press was really good. Like, really well played by Jeremy Strong. Just how sort of deadpan and muted he is, and seemingly in his own world. And when he sees like Marsha come in and just different people talking to him, he just seems in his own space. and yet everybody else is milling about having discussions, like taking care of business. So it's a perfect snapshot of like these siblings still coming to terms with the loss of their father and mourning, but then in the background everybody just high energy as always, like trying to get on with things and trying to secure their own positions and just things like that. So you've got lots of great stuff with the siblings having meetings, considering their positions, like trying to once again put pressure on the Swedish tech character to maybe get that done, but they don't get very far. They get one of his contacts who's very casual about the whole thing and isn't really going to help them. But there's just different stuff going on, and every character has the role to play. But it's just interesting, the stuff with Kendall at the start of the episode. Then he seems to be taking it the most to heart. Like, he's the one who seems to be mourning like the most, and I think what we see in the episode is that he's become very good at playing the game. He's become very good at being diplomatic when he needs to be, because certainly the way he addresses people and the way he talks in the meetings. Because one thing I really like with him and Roman in the episode is that Roman is his usual, like, straight talking, brass sort of self, and because it's like when they start talking about like just like sort of damaging like the father's reputation as almost a way for the siblings to look better and to be taken seriously, and Roman's just like is usual, like, so no way, get the fuck out of yourself type thing. And whereas we see the demeanor of Kendall is a lot more like controlled. He's a lot more diplomatic about it, so it's almost like the two contrasts with the brothers. But then we see by the end of the episode how manipulative and how sneaky Kendall can be, and how he sort of wrestles control. But there's lots of fun stuff, there's lots of good lines, like there's lots of cringe lines, like there's the scene where they're reading like the reviews and the stories in the paper about Logan's passing, and almost like the legacy as far as like the journalists are concerned, and just they're coming out with these really cringe but very funny lines about like how to interpret what the papers are saying, and that's another thing in the episode, because I sort of like when Tom's talking to like Jerry and talking to like the main board members, and he's sort of trying to shit on like the Roy siblings, where he's like saying things like, oh, because they're not fit because they're like dipshits and you know, loose cannons, and then you have like I think it was it was Frank. I think he was like being a bit more diplomatic and like, well, there's just too much baggage at this point, I think he said, or something. But all this manoeuvring throughout the episode and the pacing of the episode was very well done, and just some of like the cringeworthy stuff with this guy who at one point, who's like a family friend or something, he shows up giving this like ridiculously sentimental speech where he's like totally kissing up to Logan's legacy, like just coming out with these grand terms where he's almost talking about this guy as like just preaching free speech, or just preaching like values and being some kind of god. And like even the children are like, for God's sake, what is this guy? And Connor has a little pop as well. It's like he's talking about him like he's some sort of neo-liberalism guy. And it's sort of funny that Connor would like jump on that, like him being into politics now, being interested in politics. So that makes a lot of sense. I really like Shiv's little breakdown as well. That scene was very well done, where clearly she'd been overshadowed in this episode, where at one point they have a discussion between the three of them, and it's mentioned that Roman and Kendall can maybe team up and they can be like the face of the company for the time being, and they're like suggesting that then Shiv could like hurt their chances as a three, like the three of them, because they're just saying and they're using quite sexist language. They're using things like, you know, flaky, and just then it doesn't look very clean, like her name alongside theirs, and it's mostly Kendall. So when you see the end of the episode, like his tactics in scenes like this makes a lot of sense, and they suddenly look a lot more ruthless and calculated than maybe they did at the time. And that's what I mean. I think it's interesting then, in many ways, Roman is possibly the least ruthless of the children. So, once again, I think really props to Jeremy Strong for pulling this off so well in this episode. But we see him almost outmaneuver Shiv, like, and they kind of say, this is just for, like, public appearance. You are still involved in the process. Like, but for now we just need to be the names of it, because he talks Stewie also in coming on board and helping him out, like giving him his backing. So he's there in the meeting when they have this meeting, and there's all this back and forth. So he gets Stewie on board. He almost used like emotional blackmail, and there was some good scenes with them in the episode. But yeah, it was a really like effective scene with the three siblings, where like reluctantly Shiv agrees to step aside, but they sort of agree that she's still going to be involved, like, but in an unofficial capacity. And then once things get going and they become successful and they're sort of out of this phase, then she can join in them officially. But once again, there's a sense that she's being shut out, maybe, and she actually speaks up for them in the meeting, which ultimately leads to them agreeing on the deal for now. And then Kendall is the temporary CEO to replace his father, and then you've got Roman alongside him, and Stewie comes in as well. And like Shiv actually speaks up for them in the meeting to help get it through, and just her reactions, like when she leaves the room, and you've got like Stewie and someone else sort of cheering and laughing, celebrating. You've got "Long Live the King" being sung, and like just her reactions, like, is so well done. I also like the intimate scene with Tom on the stairs. That was very good. Again, it's sort of interesting then a lot of their scenes this season so far have been these really intimate style scenes where they're off to the side or they're in like an enclosed room, and there's something quite tender about those scenes where there's still a lot of heat between these two, but like on some levels they are engaging, and they're doing it in private, because in public they have been on opposite sides and at each other's throat. But like once again, Tom is quite sincere to her in this scene, and she's talking about the prospect of having like a baby in the future, but also, like, Tom's talking about, do you remember the first time we met in France? And so it's nicely done the way you see Shiv slowly, like trying to put up a brave face, but also slowly having, like a breakdown, getting, like, unnerved in this episode, just feeling her position, like, slipping away. So that was all nicely done. There's some fun little scenes with Greg, like him milling about, trying to be like appropriate, trying to be very touchy-feely to the siblings. And once again, that's just fun. Like where you can see Roman's like not really having it. He's just saying, no, we don't need a pet, would you fuck off? Or whereas again Kendall's being more diplomatic and say, oh, thanks man, thanks a lot, that sort of thing. And like Greg's big scene is him thinking for a moment then he might be number two to Kendall, because once again there seemed to be something on the scribble on the paper that might indicate that then he might have some sort of a role. But once again, there's just so many like pieces to this whole thing, because at one point Tom is like jockeying for position to be the CEO, and he's sort of claiming that, or it's said to him, then really the only person who liked you and considered you for any kind of CEO role was Logan himself, who isn't really around. And you've also got baggage now because of the like pending separation of you and his daughter. She doesn't like you anymore. So there's just lots of really heated like snapping back and forth in the episode, which is so well done. But when you see the end of the episode and the twist in how Kendall regains control and is just so ruthless, because as I said, that they're debating how to handle the public presentation of this new look lineup, where so Hugo and Catalina are suggesting then either the siblings could be like very true to the father's image and just presenting this as, okay, we're going to run the company as he would, or the other option is then they sort of bring up some of the dirt with the father and kind of suggest then towards the end of his life he was losing his marbles, and as a way to like suddenly make them look more competent, because there's like question marks over their abilities to do the job. So that's kind of a strategy that's put out there. And as I said, like both Roman and Kendall agree, like, no, I don't think it's best to shit on our fathers and our father at this time. And like Roman is once again a lot more brass and direct, and Kendall says it like more diplomatically and like calm. But they both agree. But then the twist of the episode is then Kendall goes to Hugo at the end and he suggests, yeah, let's do it. Let's bring up some dirt on my father. And the way he puts it, which is very interesting, is then he would do the same if he was in this position. So once again, morality kind of goes out the window. It's almost like it's dog eat dog, and if he was in this position and the roles were reversed, he would do the same, which may well be true, but the fact is, this is the way it's all gone down, and it's Kendall who's now showing his ruthless side. And what he has in his favour is that earlier in the episode, Hugo has mentioned to him about his daughter, like selling these stock options, which was tied to the firm, tied to Logan's firm. And how that suddenly could look quite bad, and Hugo's once again trying to distance himself from that, and at the time you think, well, it's sort of no big deal, it's just a bit of a minor detail, but great writing that they come back to it at the end of the episode, because it's what Kendall uses to blackmail Hugo, where he says, I can bring this out the bag if you don't go through with this, because when Kendall goes to Hugo, he's trying to say, well, maybe it's not such a good idea at the moment, and he's like, oh, I can bring this out, and that's again the master sort of manipulator, which is Kendall. So Jeremy Strong, the MVP of the episode in many ways, and it was certainly his story this episode, but lots of great stuff, lots of fun, enjoyable stuff, great dialogue as always, and a really solid follow-up from such a dramatic episode last week, and we keep rolling, and there's lots of fun, lots of twists and turns, lots of drama still to come in the final season, so I'm really psyched for this. So that's another really great episode of Succession for this week, episode 4 of the final season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. And another big show I'm covering at the moment is Yellow Jackets. So I'm covering season 2 of that. So you can check out those reviews if you're a fan. I'll put the link to the latest review in the top corner of this video if you want to check that out. But thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.